I need a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes from February 20th, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, minutes stand as written. If you've not done so, please sign in at the back of the room so the secretary will have record of everyone speaking tonight. And anyone wishing to speak tonight, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Answer with I do. Thank you. Do we have any special requests tonight, continuance, withdrawals, or waivers?
We do have a withdrawal petition 18 LUSV 03 for 5760 Sunnyside Road. Did not need a variance, so that has been withdrawn.
Thank you. Then we will continue on with old business 18 LSV 02 10775 Indian Lake Boulevard South. A variance of development standard of the consolidating zoning and subdivision ordinance of table 744-201-1 to permit the construction of a detached accessory building with a 10-foot west side setback and 10 feet rear setback, and to legally establish an existing detached accessory building located within the established front yard. Petitioner, want to step to the mic?
Thank you, Chairperson Lytle, members of the board. My name is Paul Lambie. I'm with A1 Expeditors, and here today representing Mark and Sean Davis, the petitioners on this request. To start out, I want to indicate that, well, as you may know, this petition was continued from last month's hearing and has been amended to add the request for the shed or mini barn in the within the established front yard and within the side yard setback. The original request, as you just heard, was for the pole barn with the 10-foot side and rear setbacks. We want to withdraw the request relative to the pole barn setbacks. Whatever the Davises should choose to do as far as constructing something in the future in the backyard. They intend to meet all of the ordinance requirements to do that. And so the only thing that we want to move forward with is the variance of development standards to legally establish the 12 by 14 foot shed within the established front yard and with a 5-foot east setback. And I don't know if I should I just go ahead with that request, or do you need to acknowledge the withdrawal of the other part at this point?
They need to vote on the withdrawal of that portion.
We do.
Because it's a withdrawal. He's amending, Larry, he's amending his petition. We just need to vote on the withdrawal of that portion and then we can go on with the remainder, or how would we?
Just needs to acknowledge the withdrawal of the pole barn request.
Okay.
Okay, so I just have to have on record that the board is going to take the withdrawal of the, okay. I want to be on record as saying that the chair understands that the petition is withdrawing the backyard.
The request for 10-foot side and rear setbacks for the proposed pole barn.
Okay, is withdrawing the pole barn request, and we're looking at just the front yard at this point, correct?
Correct, thank you. The building in question, which you can see on the site plan and the staff report, is a small mini barn, and it is located in front of the established front building line of the house. The ordinance does not allow any detached accessory buildings to sit forward of the front of the house. And I believe staff will concur that the reason that that's in the ordinance is to try to make sure that what you see from the street is the front of the house, that you don't have a garage or a building sitting out in front of the house, blocking the view of the house, blocking neighbors' views across their front yards. And this building does not interfere with those goals of the ordinance because it is tucked into a wooded area. which I think you can see on, somewhat on the aerial photo that is included in the staff report. I actually have a little bit better document here if I can hand out to you.
Thank you.
It's just a little bit closer view of the property and actually shows the wooded area a little bit better because the aerial photos that are on the Indianapolis website, they usually, for good reason, take those when there's no foliage on the trees so they can get a better view of the ground. But you can see where the shed sits near the east property line. Everything from the front of that shed out to the street is trees. You basically can't see the shed from the street at all. And it's also screened from neighbors to the east as well. So in addition to being in front of the front building line of the house, it also sits 5 feet off the east property line where a 15-foot side setback is required. But again, given the natural screening of the wooded area there, we think that that justifies the location and prevents any negative impact on the nearby property owners. As well, it should be noted that the shed has been there somewhere in the vicinity of 20 years. We do have a copy of a survey that Mr. Davis brought with from 2001 that shows the shed in that location, and also a couple of photos. If I can give you those. Apologize, I only have one copy for you guys to pass around. Didn't get that in time to make more copies. But so the survey shows the shed being there in 2001. The photographs are actually of the building materials inside the shed. You can see them stamped with a date of 1996. So we know the shed has been there since somewhere between 96 and 2001, so going on 20 years. Hasn't caused any complaints or anything that we're aware of. So we do think that the findings of fact that are statutorily required, that this not negatively impact, negatively impact the public, adversely affect the use or value of adjoining properties, are met, and we think there is a practical difficulty given that it was put in place several owners ago. The Davises just have only been at the property, between a year and a half. So they had no idea that that was in violation, and it hasn't been cited for a violation, but in reviewing our request after we filed the initial variance for the garage, we wanted to look and make sure everything else was in compliance and realize that this shed is in a location that is non-conforming to the current ordinance. We did some checking to see if a variance had been granted previously and couldn't find any record of that, so that's why we added it to the variance request, just to get out in front of that and make sure it's legally established in that location where it's been for going on probably about 20 years. Just to make sure that there wouldn't be a problem with that in the future. And I think that's all I have to say on that at this point. I'll try to be mindful of your time and keep things rolling along, but we'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any from the board.
Does the board have any questions at this time?
No, ma'am.
Okay. You answered my question, when was it built? So that was my concern. Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone here for or against the petition?
My name is Paul Oler. I live at 10831 Indian Lake Boulevard South. I am one of the properties immediately east of this property. The shed was built in '96, and it was built 3 owners ago. We were here to remonstrate about the setbacks, but since that's been removed, there's no remonstration. But we did have a few commitments we thought we might have tried to put on to protect the barn and the neighborhood to make sure where it is where it stays. I don't know if you'd like me to read them. I have a copy for everybody if you just like it. I've given Mr. Lambie a copy, and I believe they're okay with it. I did change the vehicles, so. I can read it real quick if you'd like.
Please.
That the variance is for this shed on this location only, so that there wouldn't be a second building or a larger building put on the site. The shed will remain in its current footprint so that it won't move out into view, or that the property between the existing drive and the east property line will remain in its current state, which is grass and trees. That's just the guarantee that that shielding stays in place. And the last one is that there'll be no parking or storage of equipment in the grassy area in front of the barn. That's about all we have. Other than that, I believe all the neighbors are here, or the ones that aren't here we've spoken to, and I don't think anybody had any objections with the shed being there. So, thank you.
Okay, I have one question. It says there will be no parking of equipment in this area. Can you be a little bit more specific of what you mean by equipment? Step up to the mic so we can have it for a record, please.
Equipment would be trailers and.
What's stored in there now?
Well, at the moment, there are occasionally vehicles parked there, which in this area, we all have very long, thin driveways. Sometimes you have to pull off in the grass, but there have been in the past some issues with equipment stored there on the property. So we just wanted to make sure that the area in front of the barn, that there was nothing stored in that. It's a small area, big enough for 1 or 2 cars. So that's just why we added that.
Is that what, excuse me, is that what citations have been issued for in the past?
I know there have been citations. I don't know specifically
Okay.
what they were exactly for.
But the zoning would already account for that, I imagine.
I don't think those citations had any issues with the
Citations
front of the house and the barn.
with The Marion County Staff Report is the second item, if you guys want to look there.
I think staff would be better able to address that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else for or against the petition? Councilperson Bob Jones.
How you doing, Madam President, fellow zoning members? I was actually here for 2 things, but now it's one. If you go to the staff report on the second page, at the very top it says 2018 DVL 002, and you go down to the second one where staff would note the site and subject to violations. In the past 5 days, I've got several complaints for these exact same violations. I've been by there 2 or 3 times. It looks to me apparently he owns a snow removal / lawn business because it looks like commercial vehicles are there. On the part of the barn, I've driven by there and it looks like he's inherited this problem. And in all likelihood, to me, looking at this, there's nothing else in the neighborhood that has anything like it, but it is hidden. So to me, and just my own opinion, it's kind of hard, I think, when you inherit a property 20 years to make someone remove their barn. So in saying that, I would also like to say that I think there needs to be commitments, because the problems I hear from the neighbors is there's a history of junk, trash, debris, pallets, commercial vehicles parking in the yard, trailers, lawn, snow, business and equipment as well. So I would ask in commitments that there would be no parking in that area of any snow or lawn or commercial property of all in that grassy area, because there's also vehicles being parked in that grassy area is what they're telling me as well. Also, there's a problem with drainage. I know Counselor Parker is here and she has some photos. I don't know if she's going to speak, but there also is a problem with drainage, and it looks like it's coming from that barn. So I would ask that something be done with the drainage, or possibly some landscaping, put up some pine trees or something to stop that drainage issue. And that is it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks. Any? Counselor Becky Parker?
Originally, Becky Parker, 10739 Indian Lake Boulevard, South Drive. Originally, I was going to speak about the petition for the variance for the setbacks and not the mini barn. But since Counselor Jones got up here and discussed a couple of issues, I did want to talk about those because I do think they're relevant. What he's talking about, and I think I included them with a letter that I supplied to all of you for last month's meeting. This property sits higher, and everybody sits higher. We get all the runoff from Sunnyside. It comes all the way down. We always have, the 25 years that we've been there. And our front yard gets flooded, and it usually quickly drains. My fear is, and this has nothing to do with tonight because we're not going to be discussing this, but this is what he's talking about. My fear is if he builds this 2,142 square foot metal barn and then puts a huge surface in front of it, which you would need to bring your vehicles in and out, whether it's gravel, blacktop, whatever, that you're going to add a lot of impervious surface to this little backyard. And therefore, I'm really concerned about even more runoff. But like I said, this is nothing that you'll be voting on or probably even have anything to do with when he goes to get permits for this. He's also talking about the violations that you also have from staff, and there have been plenty of times where there have been employees that come and park their cars in the yard and then take commercial equipment from there and leave. And he was cited for that. It did appear to stop. We've noticed it's kind of picked back up because I think of the time of year. For me, this is nothing personal. We've never met. We did offer to meet through Mr. Lambie. Paul Oler and I did offer to meet with him before this to talk about this, but it did not happen. And my guess is because, you know, he wants to run his business from there, and he knows that we're completely against it. And so there's really no common ground there. So does anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you.
At this time.
Thank you.
Anybody else for or against the petition? DMD.
Yeah, thank you. As has been noted, the pole barn request has been withdrawn, so I'll reserve my comments for the shed. As was indicated, the shed is located in front of the building, but it is basically located behind a wooded area that stretches all the way up to the road, and it makes it virtually invisible from the road. And so, and the whole point of not having sheds or garages or accessory type buildings in front of a dwelling is so that that accessory structure doesn't become the dominant primary structure or appear to be the dominant primary structure instead of the house, which is supposed to be the dominant primary structure. And so with it, the shed being tucked into the woods or behind the woods, and frankly, because it is close to the lot line, the house from the street still clearly appears to be the dominant structure on the site. And so we feel that the goals of the ordinance are still achieved because of those factors. And so we do support the proposal to legalize the shed within the front yard. And of course, the length of time that the shed's been there also, you know, plays a part in our consideration of that as well. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions at this time?
Looking at the commitments that were asked for by our first remonstrator. Number 4, there will be no parking of equipment in this area. That's already in the zoning. If we ask for a commitment for that, would that have any practical difference in how zoning is enforced?
Yeah, well, it having a specific commitment tied to the variance can give it a little more teeth in that, sometimes there are nuances in the ordinance that allow things or make it more difficult to enforce things, but if you have language that says you can't do this specific thing,
Right.
then that gives them a little more teeth to point at, say, hey, you can't park, you can't put stuff in this area. So, because there can be, certain, you can park, certain types of vehicles in front of your house or whatever at certain times, so, and it's, well, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. It just gives a little more teeth.
Does the board have any other questions at this time? Is the board wanting to add the commitments that were handed to us? And maybe down the bottom, number 4, where it says there will be no parking of equipment in this area?
Yeah, it sounds like I'd like to add no parking of snow or lawn care.
I was just getting ready to say that. Trailer, vehicles, snow, lawn, or commercial use equipment.
Yeah.
Now we'll hear from the City of Lawrence.
The Director of Public Works and Code Compliance and Administration provided a memo. I'm just going to read the parts about the shed because the other part has been withdrawn. The City of Lawrence has reviewed the petition as well as the accompanying staff report for the case provided by DMD, and after careful consideration, the city adopts the staff's recommendations contained within the staff report and finds DMD's thoughts with respect to the 12-by-14 shed in the front yard reasonable. While the above is only a recommendation, the city will defer to the sound judgment of the Lawrence Board of Zoning Appeals in carrying out and abiding by its statutory duties as provided for by law.
Okay. Tishner? Is your client willing to accept these commitments?
Thank you. Yes. As has already somewhat been commented on, we do find that these are, with the exception of number 3, pretty duplicating of what the ordinance, what the variance is requesting and what the ordinance already requires or disallows. But we don't have any problem with that, with number 4 having been reworded as was indicated. Just want to make sure, clear for the record though, that doesn't preclude the parking of normal motor vehicles, automobiles, pickup truck, that type of thing. It's just business equipment is what you're basically looking at. I don't know if you can reread that.
Board, how do you,
That was my intent.
was
Business,
just business, okay.
lawn,
Trailers, snow, lawn, or commercial use equipment.
right,
And then personal vehicles, there wouldn't be an issue, correct?
yeah.
We'd be fine with agreeing to that.
Okay.
With the commitment number 3, the property between the existing drive and the east property line will remain in its current state, grass and trees. How do you feel about that?
I mean, the Davises don't have any plans of changing that, correct? So you don't have a problem with agreeing to that if that provides some peace of mind to the neighbors?
Do you have anything else to add?
Not unless there are any questions at this point.
Any questions at this point? Okay, the board ready to vote? The board will be voting on 18 LSV 02, variance of development standard of a zoning No, to illegally establish the existing detached accessory shed located within the established front yard. And they have agreed to the 4 commitments that are this variance is for this shed in this location only. The shed will remain in its current footprint. The property between the existing drive and the east property line will remain in its current state, grass and green, and there will be no parking of trailers, snow, lawn, or commercial use equipment in this area.
Sounds good.
Board has unanimously granted your petition.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any other business?
Yeah, I have a question. We had a cell tower that we gave a 30-day extension to, I believe, last month, and I don't see any mention of it. What's the status of that petition?
Approved at 3-2 without any commitments.
What?
You guys approved
Approved
at
it last
3-2 without any commitments.
We
Last
approved
month.
it?
Any other business?
No.
The Lawrence Board of Zoning Appeals is adjourned.